Hello, I'm taking on a challenge to beat every playable Nintendo published game. The next game is Trojan. Trojan was a Capcom game that was released on Nintendo's PlayChoice 10 arcade machines sometime in 1987 alongside Metroid and other third-party NES games. While the original NES release was published by Capcom, Nintendo sold the PlayChoice 10 version, as we can see from this flyer. This is why I am playing it in the challenge. Now, like a lot of these PlayChoice 10 ports, the NES game was already a port of an arcade game to begin with. Trojan was originally released by Capcom in arcades in early 1986, and the NES port was released soon after. Now, something interesting about this title is that Takashi Nishiyama was involved with its creation. Takashi Nishiyama was the creator of Kung Fu Master, which had an NES port I reviewed earlier on in the challenge. That's not all though. Nishiyama eventually went on to create both Street Fighter and Fatal Fury. Nishiyama started with IREM, where he made Kung Fu Master early on in his career. However, soon after Kenzo Tsujimoto left IREM and founded Capcom, Nishiyama followed him to Capcom, where he then created Trojan. Trojan expanded on the concepts from Kung Fu Master, and the NES version even featured a player versus player fighting mode, serving as Capcom's first game to feature a fighting game mode like this, predating Street Fighter by about a year. Looking back on the title, Nishiyama doesn't seem to regard it all that fondly. He described the game as a dark mark on his life as a game designer, and he went on to say that his only excuse for the game was that the evolution of the fighting game genre was bound to have some inevitable growing pains. Now, Nishiyama wasn't the only noteworthy Capcom developer who worked on this title. Akira Kitamura, the creator of Mega Man, was in charge of the Famicom port. In a series of tweets, Kitamura revealed that not only was this his first project at Capcom, but it was also one of Capcom's first console games that they developed in-house. You might recall that the NES port of 1942, the other Capcom game I looked at, was developed by Micronix. Now, it doesn't really look like Trojan ever got nearly as popular as Kung Fu Master, but regardless, the NES port was chosen as a game for the PlayChoice 10, where it returned to the arcades and was sold by Nintendo. Alright, with all of that out of the way, let's jump into my time with the game. The story of this one is pretty simple. You play as the Trojan warrior, and your mission is to defeat the brutal king of your enemies. Upon starting the game, we can see a map of all the stages. It looks like there are 7 stages I've got to beat. The first level was in some kind of city. As it began, immediately a bunch of guys in armor started running towards me. The controls here are pretty simple. You can duck, jump, and swing your sword like crazy. You've also got a shield that you can hold out right in front of you, and you can control where you block by either standing still or ducking, sort of similar to Zelda 2. You can also hold your shield up in the air, but this is only really useful against a few enemies. So, there were these standard gray guys that just ran towards me, as well as these red guys who shot projectiles at me. I kinda got messed up by the first red guy here. After moving forward for a bit, another guy popped out of a manhole with a bow, but I made quick work of him. I walked forward and fell right into the manhole. Down here was a small room with a new enemy who chucked a bunch of spiky balls at me. I was not ready at all for this, and I lost my first life here. On my next life, I challenged him again, and I just whacked him a bunch until he went down. There was a high jump power-up down here that made you capable of jumping higher for a short time. Honestly, these boots weren't actually all that useful other than to get out of the sewers. After getting out, I soon ran into a boss, 2 guys called the Hatchet Brothers. These enemies could toss their weapons at me, but thankfully they were kind enough to let me fight them one at a time. I still lost quite a bit of life to them though. You're just so slow in this game that it can be kind of tough to get close to enemies unscathed. Once you do reach an enemy though, it's pretty easy to just wail on them until they run out of health. After I beat these guys, the words "nice fight" appeared on the screen. I thought this was the end of the level, but it turns out that this was just a mini-boss. The level continued and my health was still low. I found another manhole, and the moment I jumped down, I got run over by some kind of enemy rolled up in a ball. Next time, I just ignored the hole and kept going. A guy in the building tried hitting me with dynamite, but the explosions were so small that they were pretty easy to dodge. Ignore the fact that I got hit by one of them anyway. Once I got past him, I ran into the real boss of the first stage, Iron Arm. This guy had, surprise surprise, an arm made of iron. He often shot his arm out at me as a projectile, and he would use his other arm as a shield. Because of this shield, I couldn't just mash my sword on him like I could for the Hatchet Brothers. I got hit by his iron arm a ton, and on the rare chance I did dodge it, the arm would just hook around and hit me from behind. Yeesh, I got destroyed by this dude. I lost my 3rd life, which sent me back to the title screen. Ouch. That's right, you only get 3 lives, and once you run out, you are sent back to the beginning of the entire game. Considering I got a game over on stage 1, this game might end up being pretty tough. Now, there is actually a pretty simple continue code in this game, but unfortunately, neither the info page on the Play Choice 10 nor the NES manual tells it to you, so I considered it off limits for the challenge. If you ever play this game yourself, don't limit yourself like I did. I honestly probably would have had more fun with the game if I had just used the continue code. I made it to the boss again, but he destroyed me once more, although I did start to figure out a strat for him. When I ducked, his attack would either hit my shield or fly over me. Then I could whack him once and jump over the hand while it was on the way back. It was a bit hard to get the timing all down, but eventually I took him out. Phew, stage 1 was finally defeated. Stage 2 was in the mountains, and now there were guys up in the hills shooting arrows at me. Thankfully, they were really slow and had limited range, so they were pretty easy to avoid. Eventually, I reached a cave where that rolling guy from the sewers appeared and was now a required fight. The manual just calls this guy the Armadillo. This fight was kind of tedious. I just had to constantly jump over him as he rolled around until he finally stood up. Then I was able to hit him just once before he would roll up into a ball again like a potato bug. He also kind of lunged at me whenever I hit him, and it took me a second to get used to the timing of it. I lost a life to this guy on my first attempt. Come on, that like barely grazed my heel. I beat him on the try after, and I moved on to the next section of the stage. This part had some kind of marsh I had to slog through, and throughout it I was bombarded by fish and attacks from these flying guys in the air. This was one of those few cases where holding the shield up was useful. Eventually, another armadillo-looking guy popped out of the water, but thankfully he didn't roll into a ball at all. Instead, he just shot fireballs at me until I got close enough to take him out. After the water section was the boss of stage 2, that guy from the sewers that threw spike balls at me. Apparently, his name is the Hunchback, and in addition to throwing those spike balls at me, he would sometimes jump to the other side of the screen. Since I already knew what to expect, I was able to easily get close to him and smack him like crazy until he went down. Level 2 complete. Phew, thankfully that was a lot easier than the first level. Stage 3 was some kind of vertical shaft with a bunch of elevators. This one was surprisingly tough. Each floor had some kind of challenge, and whenever they threw 2 red guys at me, I just had a really hard time managing their projectiles from both sides. There were also sections where bombs would constantly roll out of these holes in the walls behind me. Why on earth are bombs just casually rolling out of the walls like this? Eventually, I reached the stage's first boss, which was this big dude with a club whose name was the Muscle Man. All he did was swing it in front of him when I got close, but I still got destroyed by the guy. I didn't realize it at first, but you can't completely block his attacks with your shield, and I ended up getting totally mixed by him when he swung his club like 4 times in a row. Back to stage 1. On my next run, I developed a pretty consistent strat for the guy. I would just hit him once, then back away and wait for him to stop swinging. It was a bit slow, but once I had the spacing and timing down, it was pretty easy to get through this fight unscathed. Part 2 of this level was even worse than the first part. Not only did the game start throwing hatchet guys at me as normal enemies now, but they started combining the bombs with the normal enemies, and it just got so hectic at times. I died a bunch here. Once I finally made it to the boss, I had 1 health and no more extra lives. I walked up to him and he just swung his own sword at me like crazy, and I dropped in an instant. Game over. This guy was basically a clone of the main character. The manual says that his name is also Trojan, and his moveset was identical to mine. My eventual strategy was a patient one. I would block all of his attacks and wait for him to be at a certain distance where I could hit him safely. There's probably a faster strat for this guy, but it was just so easy for him to mow down my health if I let him get too close. On my next run, I finally beat him and moved on to stage 4. This one was in some kind of underground passageway, and those manholes from the first level were back. Inside one of them, I found an S power-up hidden in the walls. This power-up was pretty nice, as it let me walk faster, although it disappeared on death. There were also keys in this section that were required to get through certain parts of the stage. At the end of the first half of this level was another iron arm. Great. I took him out here, but I only had 1 measly bit of health remaining, and I lost it pretty early on in the next part of the stage. Here, those rolling bombs were back, and I even had to fight another one of those armadillo guys to make a key spawn in. The actual boss of this stage was just another hunchback, but now there were bombs rolling in everywhere, which made the fight a lot more chaotic. I got destroyed by a spike ball bomb combo and lost my last life to him. Bummer, back to stage 1. This is where I first started to really struggle. A lot of these stages weren't all that bad, but since I went back to the start every single game over, it was difficult to maintain enough life to get through the game. I just had to get better and better at the old stages to make it further. Something I also learned that helped a lot was that there were more secret upgrades in those underground sewer rooms that I had been missing. I had to swing at really precise spots on the walls to make them appear. The most useful of these was the P power-up. This increased how much damage I did to enemies, and I could even stack 2 of them together to become even stronger. This was extremely helpful against the bosses, although you do lose it upon death like the speed power-up. There was one P power-up in stage 1 and another one all the way in stage 4. If I could just get through the stages without dying, I'd become super strong. Sounds easy, right? Unfortunately, I would often lose at least 1 life on stage 3, but I did eventually get good enough to see the double upgrade a few times. With even a single P power-up though, the boss of stage 4 was a ton easier, and I eventually crushed him and moved on to stage 5. This one was another vertical shaft, but to my surprise, it was way easier than the other vertical shaft level. There were a few more of those hatchet guys, but after a bit, there were a ton of free items too. There was an extra life, a health refill, and even Capcom's signature Yashi Chi item, which gave me a ton of points. At the end of this stage was a fight against the Muscle Man, immediately followed by another fight against Iron Arm. At this point, I had gotten pretty good at these guys, so I beat them on my first try. To my surprise, level 5 ended already after them. Phew, that stage was a nice break. Up next was stage 6, and this one basically served as the final level. I was in some kind of temple now, and throughout the entirety of the first part of the stage, a hunchback was hopping around up top and throwing spike balls at me. It wasn't too tough to get through though, and at the end there was another fight against Trojan. Unfortunately, he cooked me, and I lost my P power-up. I got through him on my next try though, and moved on to the next section. This part was pretty normal, but the boss was super brutal. This guy with a ball and chain burst out of the wall. His name was King Shriek, and he swung his weapon around his head. Man, I could not figure out how to safely attack this guy. I got destroyed by him and got a game over. On my next run, I managed to get the double P power-up all the way to stage 6. Maybe this would give me the edge I needed. Unfortunately, I reached the boss with low health, and I died to him in a single hit. On one of my attempts, I tried to stay right in front of him as he spawned in, but I got destroyed by the rubble that flew around as he entered the fight. To make matters worse, this rubble glitched into my next life and hit me the moment I spawned in. Come on. Well, despite this, I finally managed to get close enough to hit him. I just started smacking him like crazy and he finally went down. Phew, I did it. Why is there still an enemy health bar at the top? That's right, there's 2 of these guys. A second one spawned in and destroyed me. I was starting to get better at the timing now though, and since I had enough lives remaining, I finally managed to beat both of these guys on my next try. Up next was stage 7, and this one was simply a fight against the final boss, King Achilles. This guy threw off his cloak, which gracefully floated off to the side. Once the boss started, I approached him and he swung a bunch at me and took out my full health bar in only 2 hits. Jeez, that's brutal. On my next try, I realized you could block his attack, but his range was just so massive that I didn't stand a chance. I got backed into the corner and got clobbered again, getting another game over. Man, this guy looks like he's gonna be really tough. How do I even hit the guy, let alone survive long enough to defeat him? After another failed run, I managed to reach him with a double power upgrade. This time I tried jumping in with an attack followed by an immediate block. I actually managed to hit him once with this, but I still ended up getting destroyed by him, meaning I lost the upgrades and it was now way harder. During these next few attempts, I started to find a strat that seemed like it might work if I had the upgrades. Basically, I just kept whacking at him to force him to block, then I would try to time an attack to hit him right as he stood up after the block. I was often able to get a handful of hits on him with this, but unfortunately, without the extra damage, I wasn't able to pull it off, and I got another game over, sending me back to the start. After another run through the entire game, I got to him again with the double power upgrade. Come on, I've only got 1 shot at this. If I can just time my swings right, he'll go down in 3 hits. It was tense, but I did it. I managed to knock him down without getting hit once. Phew, finally. What a tough final boss. After this, it showed me the cast of characters and the game was complete. After beating the game, I took a quick peek at the Versus mode just so I could get a glimpse of Capcom's first fighting game. In this mode, player 2 plays as the Trojan boss, which I guess makes sense since he had the same moves as me. I wasn't playing against anyone real here though, so I just clobbered him until I won 3 times. With that, my time with Trojan was complete. On to the review. Honestly, after being pleasantly surprised by Kung Fu, this one was kind of disappointing. Conceptually, making a more complex version of Kung Fu seems like a good idea, but unfortunately, there's just something about this game that doesn't quite work. You just feel really slow, and it doesn't entirely feel like the game gives you the right tools to take on everything it throws at you. There's not a whole lot of iframes when you get hit either, so you can pretty easily get stuck in situations where your health will just drop rapidly. Also, both the visuals and the music were kind of weak. There were a few places where the visuals would just bug out, and a lot of the music was kind of ear-grating. I also really would have preferred more lives with this one. Getting only 3 lives to beat the entirety of the game often just made resets feel like a chore. It didn't even take me too long to beat the game, but I spent too much time replaying old levels that I didn't find particularly fun to begin with. Even setting the difficulty aside, it just didn't quite feel all that fun to play. There's something here that almost works, but unfortunately not everything quite comes together. I gave the game a 5 out of 10. With Trojan complete, I have now finished 65 out of the 150 NES games in the challenge, meaning I am now 43.33% of the way through all of the NES games. Thanks for watching the video. If you want to see more of these in the future, make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you won't miss out on the next one. Also leave a like if you enjoyed it, since it will help the channel grow and motivate me to continue this series. I hope I will see you in the next step of my quest to beat every Nintendo game.